an Idaho Republican has proposed literal child labor. So now this is Idaho Representative Ron Mendiv. He's a state representative, and he thinks kids these days, well, let me tell you what, they got it too easy. Getting a free or even reduced price lunch. Oh, no.
Can't let that happen.
Not at my school district. Let me tell you what. No, you're gonna have to work for that. So let me get into the details, right? So during an education committee meeting on Tuesday, Representative Mendiv is quoted saying this: "If we could find a way for the students to work to earn credits for their school lunch, I don't think we'd see any of the waste we do in that program because it doesn't mean much." Okay, first off, I don't know if he knows this, but the kids, when they're in school, are working. It's schoolwork. They're not sitting and sitting around and doing happy fun time. No, school is actually work. I don't think people understand that education, getting educated, does take a lot of focus, mental power. They work. And by the way, they should be focused on learning, focused on their education. They should not be having to do manual labor for lunch credit. I mean, no, but thirdly, the thing here is mainly this bill is there to shame poor people. Because who are the people that are not being able to afford, lunch? The people who need the free lunch. Well, those are economically disadvantaged people. That's the kids that are on the free lunch program. They're low income. Now, what do you think is going to happen to them if you start having them do manual labor for lunch? Well, actually, there's a few things that will happen. First, to the kids, well, they're going to get picked on. I mean, if you have, I think it's going to get out. Word's going to get out. Like, oh, hey, look, little Timmy's scrubbing the bathrooms, scrubbing the toilets. Oh, it must be he's poor. He's got to work for lunch money. Kids are cruel. I know. And then, by the way, what about the people whose jobs that actually is? Who get paid to do that stuff that the kids would potentially assist with, right? Janitorial work, for example. You going to downsize on janitors now? Well, because you got the kids who are doing it, so you're saving money. Disgusting, right? And so, look, contrast this, right? What this guy is trying to do, which is to make kids work for their school lunch. Now, there's another story from the same district. This is a constituent of theirs who went to the school. This is Amia Van Hill. She lives in Mendiv's district, goes to that high school. Or I'm sorry, not high school, goes to that school district. Now, back in 2017, she was 6 years old, and her mother, Rachel Van Hill, read her a news story about a Seattle man who'd raised a bunch of money to pay for the school lunch debts of children in that area. Now, for me, I think it's insane that, school lunches, that people can actually amass debts for school lunch, especially when you have to be there. You were mandated by the state to be at school, and then, what, they're not going to feed you? That's stupid. But look, anyway, the idea that there were children out there who actually had lunch debts blew her mind. It's a 6-year-old. Didn't make sense to her. She sees that story and she goes, well, that doesn't make sense. I can't believe there are people that have lunch debt. And then furthermore, that this wonderful person comes along and raises money and pays all that lunch debt. And she tells her mom, what can I do? What can I do? I wish I could do that for the kids at my school. If there's somebody who can't afford lunch, I want to help them get lunch. Well, that's great. Now, her mom, her mom recalled her asking, what can I do to raise money? And so she ended up setting up a lemonade stand to raise money from the community and actually raised about $23,000. Her mom said, quote, she was driven by making sure every kid gets breakfast and lunch. She really wants to help. So, for one, that story is both heartwarming and heartbreaking. So, for the similar reasons, right? So, it's heartwarming because here's somebody who's in the community who has so much empathy for and kindness for people in her community, for her peers. That's wonderful, right? But it's also heartbreaking in the fact that she needed to raise money for these lunch debts to begin with. That we have a system that is so incredibly broken and unethical that you have children that have a lunch debt. I mean, and by the way, it's also heartbreaking in the fact that most people thought that this was just normal. They didn't think about it. Oh, lunch debt. Oh, right. Oh, wow. People have lunch debt. Oh, I guess I'll donate. Or you could donate, and then you could also work to change the system. Now, that said, this is back in 2017. 2019, the pandemic hits. And the federal government actually did something smart and good. The federal government began paying for all school breakfasts and lunches. Well, that's wonderful. Unfortunately, that program ended. In fact, it ended under the Biden administration, I believe. Started under the Trump administration. Fascinating, right? It's one of the few things the Trump administration actually did that was halfway decent. And under the Biden administration, it goes away, along with a lot of the other COVID related help for, average people. Now, that said, by the way, a lot of Republicans were against continuing those programs as well. So, but anyway, look, in the school district that Mendiv is from, those meals are still free for kids from a single household with an income of $17,677. I'm sorry, $667 or less. Those from a single household with an income of $25,142 or less qualify for reduced price lunch. Otherwise, if you are, again, these are means tested. If you make more than that, if your family makes more than that, then elementary school kids pay about $2 for breakfast, $3.15 for lunch. Middle school pays $3.50 for lunch and $2.10 for breakfast. So now the school says it's careful not to signal in the cafeteria what students are paying and which are not, but still, and I understand why it's to avoid, the social stigma that I had talked about earlier. At the same time, I don't think anybody should have to pay for lunch, any children. I believe in universal free lunches. We already had that system for a while, and then it was allowed to go away, which I think is incredibly cruel. Look, we pay taxes for schools, okay? And by the way that school's funded right now with property taxes is messed up. It doesn't work right. You end up having affluent areas that have more resources to be able to pay for things, and then you have less affluent areas that are not able to pay for a good education and give these children a good, proper education, and they should have it. But that said, we need, since we already do pay taxes for these schools, that should include free lunches. Hands down, should be absolutely universal. Universal. And by the way, I would also add, make sure that no teacher ever has to buy learning materials for their classrooms, that they get everything that they need. But of course, you have right-wingers that have defunded all of these public schools so much to the extent of where they're running essentially bare bones. That said, Mendiv would probably look at those proposals and say,
can't let that happen.
Nope. If you're poor, you got to work for your lunch. That's right. You get down and you scrub that toilet. You poor kid. Yeah, your parents are so poor. That's your fault. You get to suffer for it. No, F off. And by the way, This is not the only staunchly terrible position that he has taken on issues. This guy is apparently just one of the worst kinds of people imaginable. In fact, according to the Daily Beast, he's caused to serve with some stances on things like abortion, for example. He said that if you support abortion, that you're also supporting prostitution, saying that it's both a woman's choice. Now, funny enough, I actually think that prostitution's totally fine. I think it should be legalized and regulated. And I say that because, and you might be like, oh my God, what the hell? No, it's to protect sex workers. Right now, sex workers are forced underground. And by the way, that kind of work has existed since the beginning of civilization. If you keep it illegal, you keep it underground, what you're doing is that you're putting those who engage in the practice at higher risk of being exploited. And they're already at massively high risks. And by the way, if you also keep it illegal and unregulated, who does that help? It helps human traffickers, people like Andrew Tate. And look, victims of trafficking who end up in the sex trade, they can't go to the cops. No, they're afraid that they're going to be arrested and punished for participating in it. So, okay, it's a weird comparison that he makes, right? I believe in the right to an abortion. I believe in the ability for any consenting adult to do sex work. Again, legalized, regulated, etc. But if you compare it like this guy, well, I mean, that's ridiculous. There's no comparison here. But he says prostitution is a choice more so than abortion would be. No one is forced into that. Actually, plenty of people are forced into sex work. I don't really get his point. It's pretty ridiculous. Now, there's more. On COVID, he gets more nonsensical. Mendiv claims that hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin are superior to the vaccine. Now, look, neither of those drugs have been approved for COVID at all. The only time that you should be taking ivermectin is if you have worms in your eyeballs. I hear it's very effective at doing that. It even won a Nobel Prize. Very, very good if you've got worms in your eyes. Not so much for COVID. I don't know if it works with worms in your brain either. Perhaps. Now, Mendiv also evokes God while imposing vaccine mandates. He says, quote, your personal relationship to the God of creation is not something everybody else should be able to inquire about. Again, what? I don't even know what that means. How does that apply to the vaccine? How? It doesn't have to do anything with the vaccine. Now, he's actually done some real harm other than just saying terrible things. In fact, as a member of the Education Committee, the Education Committee, he was party to a successful effort to strip climate change from the curriculums in Idaho schools. So there are children in Idaho who, thanks to big government censorship, are not learning about a natural process called climate change. Now, he also had joined like-minded legislators, because it is Idaho. Sorry, you got some real crappy politicians out there. And opposing a $6 million federal early education grant intended for working parents with children aged 5 and under. Well, so, wait a minute. Why would you be against more money for education? That doesn't make any sense. I thought you were supposed to be for anything that helps people, children in your district get a good quality education. Well, Mendiv contended that the grant's real intent was indoctrination. That's right. He says it's going to indoctrinate preschoolers with critical race theory.
Can't let that happen.
That he looks at that money and that's exactly what he says. No.
Can't let that happen.
Money for stuff. For education. Oh, no. No, can't do that. Mm-mm. Stupid. Everything comes down to critical. Oh my God. Critical race theory. Everything comes down to it. Everything comes down to it. Now, the guy's a complete lunatic. I'm convinced that this man hates children because if you don't want them learning facts that are going to help them in life, then you're doing children a disservice. Especially if you're trying to prevent people from learning empathy. Now, again, compare that to 12-year-old, now 12, by the way, Amia Van Hill. So she's a woman, I'm sorry, not the woman. She's the girl who had raised $23,000 to help other children in her area. Well, what does she plan to do? She wants to keep raising money to help do bigger and better things for her community. Her biggest thing is to try to inspire other children to be good and decent people. In fact, Amia's mother said on Wednesday, quote, she just wants to inspire other kids. Now, this is the complete opposite of lunatic Mendiv. Because she has empathy. She has understanding and an actual desire to help her community, to help people. Now, I'm sure that's going to, lead to some ire from people like Mendiv, who will at some point accuse her of being
pink-haired communist.
And, for trying to fix problems that people like Mendiv have created. The younger generation, look, a lot of them look to be very, very progressive, and that's a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, you still have people like Mendiv that are in power, that are still running things, and until they're no longer in those positions of power, ain't nothing going to get better. But I think in the end, things will